What is good, Tsla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what data just came out that's helping the market pump a little bit more and whether or not this move is likely going to last, looking at the current technicals. I'm also going to break down what the news is saying about the markets in Tesla and what you should be watching for as time progresses. But before I break anything down, all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moon link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moon with the link down below and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. The offer ends in just 12 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with Tesla. Tesla's currently pumping a little bit more in the pre-market, but we want to be very careful seeing moves like this because, as I mentioned before, the entire market is very overbought and the market's been pumping nonstop for 5 straight days. So you want to be very careful when you see the market pumping so much with no retracement, and we have more data coming out that could affect this rally. But why did the market pump more? Why is SPY up another 2 points in the pre-market? Why is Tesla up over 3 points? The answer is we had some new data that came out. The unemployment numbers came out an hour before open. They just came out, and you could see that we had a 3.9% unemployment rate. That's hotter than expected, meaning that unemployment went up. It's hotter than the forecast and the consensus, and this is once again a good sign for the markets. Non-farm payrolls were lower than expected, which is something the market liked, and all this data has been decent so far. Now, why is it good that the unemployment rate was hotter than expected? That's because the Fed is de-incentivized to raise rates more, and many analysts are now saying that there's less than a 20% chance the Fed is going to raise rates again this year. On top of this, with the jobs report, this sent the yields lower. Yields dropped, causing the stock market to start pumping as we saw futures continuing to hold. Now, when it comes to additional pieces of news affecting the markets, the major indices rallied on Thursday. This was one of their best trading days in months. Apple did drop a bit. We saw Apple continue to sink because of the iPhone sales potentially declining. This is the fourth straight quarter where this happened. And on top of that, revenue was down less than 1% for the period, but the full year revenue was down 3% from the fiscal 2022. And there could be a very mild holiday quarter too. So that wasn't the best of news. Apple dropped more significantly yesterday, but now it's trying to rebound a little bit. We'll see if Apple rebounds or not. Besides that, looking at the Christmas holiday season that's coming up, the National Retail Federation is estimating that Americans are expected to spend even more this holiday season. But you have to remember that the rate of sales growth is likely to fall short of that of recent years because of inflation, dwindling savings, and higher borrowing expenses right now with the higher rates are making things more unaffordable for people. And you have to add on the fact that Americans are just continuing to swipe those credit cards. And it's not going to be one of the most sustainable ways of paying for things because, debt is just becoming more expensive. And this could become much more difficult for them as time goes on. Now, when it comes to Starbucks, they revealed a very, very nice growth plan for the rest of the decade, which is good for them. So hopefully that benefits them. For now, I just want to focus on what's going on with the markets. We didn't have anything significant coming out for earnings. The last one was Apple. So now we're going to be watching to see how the market moves from here. Looking at Tesla, we saw this thing pump with the jobs report. It hit 222.65, very close to the resistance we called out. But be careful, there's another bearish divergence developing, and we have even more data coming out that's going to affect Tesla in the markets. At 9:45 a.m. Eastern Time, we have the PMI report coming out. And at 10 o'clock a.m., we have the ISM Services PMI, ISM Services Employment, and more ISM data coming out. So we have a lot of data coming out 15 minutes and 30 minutes after the market opens. Will this data pump the markets more, or is it going to cause the market to slow down? We'll just have to wait and see. I just want to let you know, however, that the market is a little risky right now because we're very overbought. If you look at SPY, okay, let me just show you SPY. This thing is very close to 433. Remember, we were at 409 just a couple of days ago. Just a few days ago, we were at 409. Now we're at 433. And we got like no pullback. It just keeps going and going and going. That's not always sustainable, guys. You want to be very careful. Same thing with Tesla. I mean, Tesla was just at, 194 just a couple of days ago. 3 to 4 days ago, we were at 194. And now we're at 222. So it's awesome to see Tesla pumping, but be a little bit careful looking at the bearish divergences and the fact that the entire market's overbought, including Nvidia and the QQQ. So what do I see going on with the market from here? So Tesla ended up going up to 222.5, very close to this resistance we called out. If it breaks that, I mean 225 is on the table. If it gets above that, watch 228 and then 230 above that. If we start breaking down, you're going to be watching support at 220 flat. If we lose that, watch this previous resistance becoming support at 219. Then we have 216.8. Then we have 215 right here, 212, 210, and 208 as supports. But the more significant one is going to be 215. So 215 is going to be key. What do I think Tesla's going to do? My answer is because we have a bearish divergence, because we have all this data coming out, we'll have to see which way this data causes Tesla to move. It is still on an uptrend, but you want to be careful because of how overbought we are. Now, there's a possibility Tesla pumps a little bit more, but it might reject thanks to the bearish divergence. We might see it start to come down depending on the data. And it could come down to fill this gap. There's a gap that's forming all the way back down to like this 218 area. Maybe it could just like touch 215 to 217, then bounce off that and trade sideways. And I think that Tesla is going to try to hold up, but there could be a risk of it coming down to fill the gap and then just like staying range bound for today. But there could be a pop and drop like move for today as being the most likely possibility. But just to be safe, make sure you watch the reaction from the data. For SPY, SPY is continuing to pump, right? The S&P 500 is still up in the pre-market, but you want to be careful because just like Tesla, SPY still has this bearish divergence developing. And on top of that, you will notice that, with all this data coming out at 9:45 and 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm expecting some high volatility for the first 15 to 30 minutes, and we'll see what the direction ends up being after 10 o'clock a.m. So if we pump more, we could pump a little bit more. We have some resistance at 433, 434 flats, 435, and then above that we have 437. And if we break 437, like I said before, 438 and then 440 are two levels to watch for. For support, you're going to be watching 432.5. If we lose that, watch 431.5, 430, 429.5, 429, and 427.5, and 426.5, and 425. I know those are lots of levels, but we have like a lot of levels we've broken past in such a short period of time. What do I think SPY is going to do? Well, the issue I see with SPY is there's a bearish divergence and we're very overbought. Our RSI is currently at 78 on the 30 minutes time frame. On the 4-hour time frame, it's currently at 77. It's so overbought to the point where it's very risky. It is possible it tries to pump a little bit more. I mean, 438 could be a target for where we end up projecting, looking at the inverse head and shoulders. But you want to be very careful when it comes to targets like this because, like I said, guys, the market is just crazy overbought. It's very risky. And you don't typically see moves like this at all. You almost never see moves like this on SPY where it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes like there's no tomorrow. So I'm just going to be very careful in this range. I expect it to reject off 438 if we do get up there, but it could even reject here depending on the data. So you just want to be very careful and just know that this is just not a very sustainable move that SPY is making. It's not going to keep pumping forever. It's eventually going to have to pull back. It could happen soon, either today or going into Monday, so just be very careful. Now, anyways, looking at the trend, it is looking like it's trying to pump a bit more, but watch for the reaction to this data. We will see if it keeps going higher and then it rejects. If it goes all the way up to 438 and rejects, or if it kind of rejects very close to 433 to 434, one of those areas should cause some kind of rejection. And if it does reject right here, it could come down to fill this gap back down to 430. And then once it fills that gap, we might just see sideways price action. So it really depends on if we pump more or not, if we could get above 435 or not. If we fail to do so, then we could reject and come down to fill the gap. If we break 435, it's going to go up to 438 in my opinion. So we're going to be watching this very carefully. Right now, there's no true sign of it breaking down yet, but there is a risk of that happening because of how overbought it is. For the QQQ, watch 365 as resistance. If we break this, watch 366, 368, and 370. For support, watch 362.25, 360, and 358. The market's continuing to hold up quite nicely, but there's a bearish divergence developing on the QQQ. If this data that comes out pumps the markets more, which would be very ironic, remember that's going to be very risky because we're still super overbought. And if we do somehow manage to pump more, which is crazy, you want to see if this thing could break 366. If the QQQ breaks 366, it could start pumping a little bit more before we get that rejection. If it, ends up getting rejected because of the data, and we come back down below 364, and then 362.5, there's a risk of it coming down to 360. In my opinion, I think it's going to either pop and drop very close to this level or pump a little bit more. We could see a few dollars to the upside before we get that rejection. One of those is likely going to be the case for the QQQ. It's very hard to predict because of how strong this is and how illogical the market could be. The market is just continuing to rip, guys, and it's very unsustainable. It's very overbought. So we'll see how this data affects us. On Nvidia stock, Nvidia is in a very interesting position. It's continuing to go, and it actually is trying to get above some key resistance. There's a bearish divergence on it as well, but we'll see if it comes down to fill this gap. If Nvidia pumps a little bit, we could pop a little bit more, but it depends on if we can break 442. If we reject off of it, we could come down to fill the gap at 435 and then start to trade sideways. If we break 442, you're going to be watching 444. If we break that, there's 448 and 451 as targets for Nvidia before this thing ends up rejecting. It's very tricky right now because it's continuing to uptrend. It looks like it wants to push up higher, but we have to see the reaction to all this data for the first 15 and 30 minutes. Also, Nvidia is overbought. It's been just continuing to rip in such a short period of time. So we'll have to wait and see if that ends up affecting it or not. Now, if you look at the chart, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders that could be developing, but it's trying to break this resistance right here. So I'm not going to really count on that just yet when we watch to see how it reacts to these levels, because that's going to be a lot more telling. When we look at Nvidia, especially on the daily time frame, what's crazy is how much it's been pumping. The daily looks like it's about to turn bullish, so there could be a little bit more upside coming, but just want to be very careful when looking at it. We have this gap up here at 448 that could get filled in the future, but for now, we're going to be looking for a potential rejection soon before we end up filling that gap. So Nvidia might pump a little bit, then drop. I think that's possible to fill the gap, or it might just go a little higher. If it breaks 444, then it could pump even higher towards 448 to 451 and then reject over there. It's got to be one of those two, so watch that level and wait and see what happens with all the data that's coming out. Finally, for Apple stock, this is kind of crazy. If we're really bullish, we want to break and hold 175. If we manage to do so, it could pump more. If we end up breaking below 172.5, it's going to come down to 170 to fill the gap. Apple's looking a little weaker than the market right now because of its earnings, but it's not really affecting the market as badly. So watch those levels and do what you have to do, guys. All right, guys, this video is a little too long, and I'm sorry about that. Have a great day. Enjoy the Friday and look at your levels, and peace out.